In this video, I'm going to teach you 5 things I wish I knew when starting to learn jazz guitar. This video is a compilation of the first 5 days of my course, Learn Your First Jazz Song in 7 Days. And in it, you'll learn the first 2 chord types that cover you for 80% of standards. And you will also learn 3 things that no one talks about with improvising that will skyrocket your progress and your performance. These 3 concepts are critical for being able to improvise freely and creatively. And if you dig what you learn here, I invite you to join my program, Chase's Guitar Academy, in the link in the description box below. You can check that out. It's at www.school.com/CGA. Starting next week, I'm also teaching 2 live classes every week, which you'd have access to as a member, and that is Jazz Guitar Foundations class for beginners to intermediate, and then also an essential jazz vocab class for intermediate to advanced players every single week. Again, you can read all the details by checking out the links in the description below. I hope you enjoy this series of classes, and if you want to get the rest of the course, you can join at CGA. Thanks, guys. Okay, so as you guys know, this is a 7-day course. Learn your first jazz song in 7 days. And really the whole goal here is we're going to go through a few different topics, and it all culminates in learning this solo jazz guitar piece. That's a basic contrafact of the tune Lady Bird. And we'll go into some of the reasons why I picked that and why I think that's a good choice for this. But let me just share with you a little bit of what this overview is going to look like, so you guys have a better idea also as far as planning and when you can tune in and whether you can access recording. So today we're going to look at some different chord voicings. The whole goal with all of this is we're really just looking at some essentials here. I'm going to lay out some fundamentals and then some other tips that even more intermediate players I think will get stuff out of. So you don't have to be an absolute beginner to get something out of this. So today we're going to look at some different chord voicings and some ways of manipulating those. Tomorrow we'll look at applying those chords with some different rhythms. And this is one I think right off the bat people will get value out of, because we're going to talk about kind of the basic jazz rhythm of the Charleston rhythm, and then also what to do beyond that, how to kind of create new rhythms off of this basic rhythm. So you don't feel like I'm just kind of, comping along the same exact thing every time. It'll be a bit more creative. Then day 3 to day 5, we're going to start to talk about improvising. Just going to show us some pretty common patterns, and these will tie back into what we did on days 1 and 2 with the chords. So we're going to keep reinforcing what we did today and tomorrow with these arpeggios, pentatonics, and then the combination. And then days 1 through 5 all will add up into day 6 and day 7, where we look at this in the context of a chord melody. And I think you guys will be pleasantly surprised at how much you already know, having gone through the first 5 days of this chord melody. So everything we're practicing is actually building you up to that, and some of the stuff we'll work on, it's presented almost exactly in that same format in the chord melody. So you can see how it's all leading to that. We're just kind of taking it one step at a time in these 3 categories, right? Any questions about this or anything up front before we actually get into it? If you have a question, you can just unmute yourself. It's hard for me to see everyone. Okay. All right. And that applies as I'm teaching this as well. So if you guys have a question as I'm going through it, just unmute yourself and tell me to hold up for a second. I'm really pretty casual here. So, all right. So let's take a look at the first day. Now, a lot of this might be familiar to some of you guys, but we're going to keep everyone on the same page here. So in this first day, we're looking at 2 voicings per chord type, and we're going to look at only 3 chord types. These are really the main chord types in jazz. There's obviously a lot of different ones, but this covers you for about 80%, 90% of standards have these chords. And that's what we're going to be dealing with in our chord melody. So we're looking at major 7, minor 7, dominant 7. And so the first ones we'll look at are these major 7 voicings. And if you're just starting out, the 2 that I think are the most important for any of these chord voicings, even if you're doing other chord types, is you need at least one voicing with the root on the A string, the fifth string, and then one voicing with the root on the E string. And we're not going to go into so much theory here. There's only 7 days. We're really just going to get right into some of the practical aspects of this and get to playing. I talk a lot about some of the theory and some different ways of fully learning this in the various courses I have. But so let's just look at these first two major 7 chords, right? The one on the A string that I talk about, root on the A string, C here, and then this C major 7. Yeah, if you don't have your guitar, feel free to grab it and kind of play along. We'll take some time as we're going through this just to like actually work this out. So this C major 7 on the A string. And then on the E string, the voicing I would look at is with the C up here on the 8th fret. And again, I don't really care at this point, like what voicing type this is versus the other one. There's all these names for them. We're just looking at these two as our main option. So if we see a major 7 chord on a lead sheet or that we're trying to play, we're either going to play one down here, C major 7, or we go up here. All right, so these are the two we're basing that off of. All right. And this word I keep using, voicing, is really just an arrangement of these notes. So the notes that make up C major 7 are C, E, G, and B. And different combinations, different orders of those notes create different voicing types. So even though it's the same group of notes, they have a slightly different sound if we start to change the order. Those notes make up a C major 7. So as long as we have those notes, it's considered a C major 7. But once we start changing the order, then we get different voicings. All right. So from these two voicings, C major 7, or up here, if we change one of these notes, then we get a dominant 7 chord. And these ones you see as just the C7, just has the 7, it doesn't have like the major or the minor in front of it on the lead sheet. And the note that we're changing in this first voicing is on the 3rd string. And we just take off our middle finger and use a bar. And then you get C7. So C major 7 has that middle finger there. C7 without it. And then same thing up here, C major 7. Here we have to change our fingering a little bit. So we switch the note on the 4th string, has to come down 1 fret. So that's C7. And when you're learning these or going through them, I want you to see them all in relation to each other in this same spot, right? So we have C major 7 here, C7 here. See them as basically it's the same shape that you can alter, you can change by just moving a note down or up. We're gonna start changing these voicings, but don't think about them as separate chords. It's this same shape that you're changing one note or another to create a new chord type. So it's, again, C7, and then C7 up here. And again, feel free to stop me if you guys have questions or any difficulties in playing through these chords. All right, so the third one, the last one we're going to look at, we keep these voicings that we had for dominant chords, and now we're going to change one more note to get minor 7. So we had C7, and now this pinky is going to come down 1 fret, and we're going to add our middle finger back in on the 2nd string, and that gives us our C minor 7. Sometimes you see this written with this hyphen. I prefer seeing it with this hyphen, but you can also see it like spelled M-I-N, spelled out. And then I should mention for the major 7, you can see it spelled out like major 7, or sometimes you see it with a triangle. That's also major 7. So this is the notation I tend to prefer. But yeah, so C minor 7 on the A string again, and then up on the E string. For the E string voicing here, you can fit all your fingers together, but it can be a little bit difficult depending on the size of your fingers and your guitar. So I actually prefer to do like two separate bars in a sense. So my middle finger will play the root on the eighth, and then my ring finger will bar the rest of it. That's pretty comfortable. It also still allows my pinky to reach other notes if I need. Whereas if I have all fingers like this, now if I want to add the ninth or change this voicing, I don't really have any finger free to do that. So that's a general principle when playing these chords, is you want to leave your pinky free most of the time if possible, because we're going to add in other melody notes, other movement to the chord. So if you can find a way of doing that for these voicing, sometimes it's not possible. And that just is the nature of whatever that voicing is. But if it is possible, you want to try and leave some fingers free. Okay, so before we go on here, what we want to do is let's just play through in each of these positions the three voicing types. So if we're on our A string set, we should play through C major 7 and then C7, and really just pay attention to which note's moving down, and then C minor 7. So you have all three there: C major, C7, C minor 7, and then go up to the higher position: C major 7, C7, C minor 7. Right? So you want to have each of those. I think about these in this context at this level as like two zones. We have this lower position for our root, and then we have this higher position. So this also gives us some coverage over the fretboard without having to overwhelm ourselves with all 5 positions for these different voicings. We can do that at a later stage, but really for right now, as long as you have these 2 different spots, you're good for a majority of what you're playing. Any questions at this stage? Everyone cool? All right. Okay, so let's add a little bit to these, because these are kind of basic voicings. Again, probably ones you're familiar with. So the way we start to adjust these is either by adding or removing one of the notes. What we were doing, we were changing some of the notes to change the chord type, but we can keep the chord type and change some of the other notes to change the flavor of the chord. So it's not just a major 7. It could be a major 9th or a 6 chord or a 6-9 chord. For the dominant 7, it could be a C9, a C13. For the minor 7, we could have a minor 11, a minor 9. So when we're changing those flavors, a lot of times musicians will refer to them as like colors, changing the color of the chord. You can think about it like the flavor. We're really just adding or removing a note from the voicing we have. And on guitar, as opposed to something like piano, we usually have to remove a note or change one of the notes that we have, because we have really limited fingers. Most of the time it's like 4 fingers to press down, or we use a bar. Whereas a piano player can really just take full advantage and doesn't have to necessarily remove notes. So let's look at our major 7 and coming up here with major 9s. And there's a lot of different voicings for major 9s. We're looking at specific ones that tie to what we just did. So let's go back to our C major 7 down here on the A string. Keeping this same shape, if we wanted to have a C major 9, that 9th is on the 2nd string on the 3rd fret. And the only way we can really get to that, since we don't have another D that's easily available, again, keeping the same shape, we take off our pinky and keep the bar. And so we're having to remove the 3rd, even though that's considered an essential note for major 7. We can take that off and create the sound of the 9th by changing that note. So in this case, we're removing that E to get the C major 9. Again, for most guitar voicings, we have to make some sort of compromise, taking out the 5th, sometimes taking out the 3rd, to get this sound, this color of the 9th, if we're looking for that, even though it takes away some other notes. A piano player would keep in the 3rd and add the 9th without having to do that. It's one of the reasons guitar has some of the sound it does, is our voicings have this limitation. And now let's do that same idea for the C major 7 that's up on the E string. So the E here that we're moving is on the 3rd string. And here we have to change our fingering a bit to get this right. Again, putting your middle finger on the bass note, the root. So we go from like this C major 7 to that major 9. One way we get around the fact that we're taking out this 3rd, even though it's essential, is we go between both voicings. So it's not like you can't play the other voicing and then easily go back to the one we're just doing now. So kind of alternating between the more simple voicing of just the exact notes in the chord and then one of these voicings that has the 9th, that gives you the color without having to totally remove the 3rd. There's a lot of ways we can get around that limitation. So that's for the C major 9. Let's look at some of the dominant 7 options. So a really common one for our C9 is this voicing right here. And if we look at it here, this would be an example where we start shifting notes around. So we want to keep in that 3rd, in this case, for the dominant. And we're going to keep it in a lower octave. And we're going to get rid of this 5th here while adding in that 9th. So we have this as our standard. And this one moves down to give us C9. Hopefully you can hear how it elevates a bit of the dominant sound. It still keeps this dominant sound, but it adds in a little bit more color, like musicians will talk about. On the other voicing we had for C7, the one up here, this is an instance where we're going to go up from one of the notes we have. So the note we have on the B string, the 2nd string, this G, we can bring that up 2 frets to A, and then we get C13. And now we're starting to get voicings that you actually hear on recordings and that musicians use all the time. And this is pretty cool because a lot of this, you don't have to get more advanced than this if you don't want to. Like a lot of musicians will just use these kind of voicings with other techniques. It's not necessarily that the voicings are more difficult. There's some musicians that, yes, will use some pretty advanced voicings and ones with a lot more stretches. But if you played through a lead sheet with just this level of voicing, it'll sound good. The main thing that will limit you will be how you're playing them and usually the rhythm. That'll make it sound more at a beginner level. But it's not so much the voicing that you're using. And then lastly, let's look at the minor 7 into minor 11. So if we go back to our minor 7, C minor 7 down here, take off your ring finger and just leave the bar. And then we get this cool C minor 11. This is a really nice one. You hear this one on things like So What. So that's the C minor 11 here. And then same idea for our voicing up higher. We have this C minor 7, that's like the bar. And that G on the B string has to come down 2 frets, and then we get C minor 11. So I'm using, middle, ring, pinky, and then index finger. Okay, so let's just kind of review each of these newer voicings. So we have C major 9, down here. And then C major 9 up here. And then we have C9 down here. And C13. And then C minor 11 and C minor 11. All right, so these are some of the voicings we can go between. And when we're doing this, don't forget about these first voicings we had. These can also be totally viable, especially moving between them and some of these more colorful options. We can go between each of these. It's not like we have to forget about the standard C major 7 or C7 or C minor 7. There's definitely instances where we'll want to play those. Okay, any questions at this point? Guys, good. Just kind of practicing through it. All right, cool. I'll get a second for people to catch up. All right, so the last thing I want to look at here is practicing through these and some ways of practicing on them so that we can really start to integrate them into our playing. And I have a few different progressions here that we'll take a look at. Let's just look at this top one. So C major 7, F major 7, D minor 7, G7. The way I would have you guys practice through this is just pick to start either this lower position or this higher position and stay in that area while you're going through these voicings, right? So let's say I pick the higher position. I'm going to be up here for C major 7. You can just play them as whole notes right now, or have a rhythm if you feel more comfortable. And now when it goes to F major 7, what I don't want to see is just jumping down here. We don't want this kind of jumping back and forth. The way we avoid that is we just generally stay in this one area. So my closer F major 7 is actually right underneath this voicing. If you're having trouble finding this type of these chord voicings as we're going through it, what it means is you need to learn the notes on this low E and low A string better. So that's where I would start if you're having trouble finding these voicings quickly and easily. It should be very almost self-evident where that F is on those low strings, at least. So C major 7 here, and then F major 7, same spot. And then our D minor 7 is again right here. It's on the 10th fret, that bar. And then G7, if we're keeping it as those standard voicings, is up here. So C major, F major, D minor. When you're reading these on the lead sheet, you don't have to keep to the exact voicing that it's maybe suggesting. So just because it says major 7 doesn't mean we can't play a C major 9.
Sorry, Chase. Can I?
Yeah, Peter.
What is the voicing you're playing for the G7? Because I was playing it on the 10th fret.
Yep.
You were playing it on the 12th.
No, I was playing on 10th. It might have just.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Is that the one you were playing, Peter?
I think that's the G9, right?
For this, I wasn't playing the G9 yet. You totally can. I was just playing the standard dominant 7 like bar.
Okay.
Yeah. Just like the C7 down here.
Right.
Yeah, I was just moving that up to the 10th.
Yeah, got it. Thanks.
But the G9 also works. If I was comping through this, I'm much more likely to play the G9 than the G7. And that's my point of this next part really, is that it can say C major 7, F major 7, D minor 7, G7, but you might play it as if it's C major 9, F major 9, D minor 11, or G13. Any of those changes where you're keeping the essential quality of the chord, but just changing the color, meaning sometimes we call it the extensions, this is like just the little, your personal flavor that you prefer for each of these voicings. A lot of times when we change that aspect of the chord, we're doing it to create certain melodies that add another layer to what we're accompanying with. So if we just kept with the standard voicings, it's giving the harmonic support, but we're not playing with any sort of melody that might interact with the soloist or just sound a little bit more interesting than forcing the same chord over and over again. So again, try it in a position up here, but then also try the lower position. So I might play C major 9, maybe F major 7 here, D minor 11, G13, and C major 9. So just as an example of what I was just talking about, creating a melody, if I do D minor 11, I have that F on top. If I go to G13, I have E on top, and then I'm coming back to C major with C major 9, or C major 9 like this, with the D on top. So I have this descending melody I create with the F, E, D. So listen for that. So those kind of melodies you might want to create in the choices of voicing that you make. All right. Some other ones that will just give you a little bit more of a test to see if you know these voicings and moving them around. F minor 7, B flat 13, C major 7. So try this middle one right here. So we have F, B flat 13. You can try it in some different spots again. So lower, I'll give you guys a minute or two to just try this one. F minor 7, B flat 13, and C major 7. Just take a minute and try that one out. Okay, and lastly, let's look at this 2-5 right here. B flat minor, E flat 7, and A flat major. So give that one a go in whichever position you feel is most comfortable. I would probably lean towards starting on this 6th fret for this B flat minor 7. Although you can start down here. So again, just take a couple minutes to practice through that in either position. Does anyone want to show which position that they did it in? Maybe unmute yourself and just play through one of the examples, that 2-5 and A flat.
Hi,
Chris?
James.
Hey, Chris.
Well, listen, I got I have really different voicings. I can go F7 like this, B flat 13, and to the C major 9 or whatever.
Okay. Yeah, so look, you were doing like F minor 9 for that?
Well, no, I'm doing the F minor 7. I'm just doing.
Oh, I got you with the pinky out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
I think this is a little too not advanced enough for me. Chase, I'll leave you guys. I'll check it out later.
Yeah, that's totally fine, Chris. I think you might get something out of this second day with the rhythm.
Maybe, yeah. I'll check in on the second or third day.
Yeah, this first one's really just to make sure everyone's on the same page with these chord voicings.
Okay.
And then from here, we can start to do something now that we have that as a framework. But yeah, if people didn't have these chords as a reference, then it becomes a lot more difficult to make sure everyone can continue along. But
okay.
Yeah, thanks,
care.
Chris.
Bye.
Anyone else want to play through one of these 2/5s?
Yeah, the
Peter?
previous one, Chase, with starting with the F minor 7.
Cool.
Because it's maybe I should. Oh, not quite. Sorry.
No, you're fine. I'm gonna stop sharing so I can actually see you.
What's happening? Oh, just a minute. Because the interesting thing is that you keep hanging on the G note.
Mm-hmm.
That one, and on the B flat, you stay on the G, and then you go to the C, and again the G. On the
Yeah.
top,
right? So you're doing this F minor 9, right?
Right.
And then which C major 7 were you playing? Oh, cool. Yeah.
9.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds nice. The
Yeah.
resolution is a little bit more subtle. That way.
Yeah, it's sometimes known as a backdoor 2/5 because we're not doing it as like a 5/1. It's a nice it you see it in certain standards. We'll make use of it. So it's a really good one to know. That flat 7 to 1. You also hear it a lot in like Stevie Wonder tunes. He uses that a lot. It's part of the sound of Stevie Wonders is some of these unexpected kind of subtle resolutions. So cool. All right, so I think that's.
I was with the B flat,
yeah, Fred.
A flat.
Yeah.
It was with the flat 9.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. And you're getting that melody because of that flat 9. Right? By doing it that way, it's great. You have that F for the B flat, the E for the flat 9 for the E flat 7, and then the E flat. And that's what we want to get to. That would be this next level. After you know the voicings, is starting to have some more intention with the specific voicing we pick so that we can come up with these little melodies and start to apply those. Awesome. Okay. This would be the time for any questions you guys have relating to really anything, whether we did it here or anything else. Like I was saying to Chris, this is really just laying out the foundation so we have these chords to work on. And then in the next couple of days, we'll be progressing from here. So if this first part felt a little bit simple, it will get more advanced with some of the rhythms and stuff we're dealing with. So any questions? Any final questions before we go? No, everyone's cool.
So Chase, I think it's a really good thing to like practice the 9th, the 13th, the 11th. So play one voicing and see where the extensions are, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
I agree with you.
I think it is important to have like this kind of basic shape that you're using as a framework for all the more advanced voicings. So it's like, okay, this is like the foundational voicing, and then all the other voicings I might learn that are around there, I see them in reference to that. And that will become more clear later when we try to shift things to different keys, or you want to quickly move, oh, that voicing now is F major, and I need to find all the other voicings I know. It's a lot easier if you know those other voicings in reference to that first shape. So being able to see, oh, it's this, but I take off my pinky. It's this, but I add this. Yeah, that's the idea.
And still, if it is easy, you still can teach your ear how this chord, how a 13 or a 9 sounds. So you might even hear it one day, and you find, that's a 9 or that's a 13, because that's a hard thing, to find out which chord it is.
Absolutely. Even as I'm going through it, I'm trying to, play these chords more clearly, emphasize certain melody notes, even as I'm going through them. And I've played them probably thousands and thousands of times. So yeah, there's still a lot to get out of them, even if you're aware of these chords already. So Sarah.
Oh, hi. Yeah, this is actually perfect for me because it's I'm still learning root third fifth and where the actual intervals are. So this is actually really good for me. So thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, so in learning through these, there's kind of two parts to it, where we want to be learning some of the theory behind it and knowing how these voicings work. But also sometimes it's helpful just to be able to like dive in and say, okay, these are some of the basic voicings, not necessarily knowing exactly which of those notes that we're playing is the root, the third, fifth, seventh, etc., but just getting an actual like sound that we can reference, and then that gives us something to something for us to think about as we're learning more of this theory. We know a voicing that we can actually play off of it. So I like building some of those practical skills while we're doing the theoretical. Any other questions? All right. So yeah, so the recordings for any of this will be in the CGA classroom in this first spot, Learn Your First Jazz Guitar Song in 7 days. So if you guys want to be able to access any of these or the PDFs that go along with it, you can sign up for a free trial. If not, no worries. But that's just where all the recordings will be held. All right, so today we are going to do day 2. And this is looking at the chord voicings that we did yesterday, but now we're going to really focus on rhythm. So one of the main things that holds back a lot of guitarists that know these voicings, they know, like we saw yesterday, some guys that know the voicings that we went over, the reason that they don't sound as good in playing them is usually due to poor rhythmic choices. So we're gonna talk about that, and we're really just gonna focus on one extra rhythm so that I can show you how that, in addition to what you might normally do, gives you many more combinations. All right. So the first rhythm we're used to seeing is what's known as the Charleston rhythm. You guys are probably familiar with this a bit, and we'll look at it in a few different ways. It sounds like this. I'll play it first so you can kind of hear it. So it's like 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, and 3, 4, right? 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1, 2, and 3, 4. So most guys, when they're getting into this, they're aware of that rhythm, but the difficulty that they find is doing anything beyond this, right? Like what do you do after this to kind of keep the feel of that swing feel? And you'll come up with some things, but they don't end up creating this sense of forward motion. It's kind of just like random chord hits, and that really can be a problem, because when you're comping, you have to, in a sense, act like the drummer, where you have to really establish a sense of time, like a sense of the groove, where if everyone dropped out, it still would feel like there's like a pulse going, like a beat. So having just hits randomly go against that kind of feel. So the rhythm we're going to talk about that lets us go beyond this and start to do some different combinations is a rhythm that starts on an upbeat. If you notice the Charleston rhythm, it starts on this downbeat. So that gives us, and usually on the first beat, right? So it gives us a very clear sense of like what the chord is and where the beat one is, which is good. The problem is if we're always starting our comping on downbeats, it doesn't give us this kind of forward motion that we get if we're playing a lot of upbeats. So if you listen to guys comping at more advanced levels, you hear that most of the comping is actually these upbeat driven chord hits or patterns. So we need a combination of downbeat rhythms that start on downbeats and patterns that start on upbeats. So the one we're going to add in starts on an upbeat, then we can start doing all kinds of combinations. So we'll look at those. So the first one that is this is the pattern we're going to look at in different combinations. It's very similar. It has this dotted quarter, and then it's followed by 2/8 notes. So the count of this would be, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, and 3, and so ba ba da, 2, 3, 4, 1, 1, 1, and 3, and 4, 1, and right. So let's just try this a little bit. I would probably do it at around 90 BPM to start. If you do it too slow, it can be really hard to get a sense of the groove. So I think 90 BPM should be pretty good for most people. You could go down to 80 if you're really struggling for that, but I think just 90, between 90 and 120 is where I'd start. So I'll just kind of loop this. You guys can kind of play along with me. 3. Fred, you have a question?
Yes, you start at the one end. So do you start with an upbeat?
Yeah, it starts on an upbeat. I would still use
upstroke.
No, that's a good question. So I would still do down, down. Let me see. This is slow enough that I would do them all as downstrokes, whether you're using a pick or thumb. Like, yeah, 1.
Yeah.
And, yeah. You could go. Yeah, I think these all feel better as downstrokes, with the emphasis on that last one. So it's ba ba da,
Okay.
da da da. Think about this. Is another tip? Sorry, Fred. What was that? You're gonna try it? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That's the right emphasis. That's it, Fred. So when you're going through these comping patterns, one other tip that I've heard is that's been really helpful for me is thinking about your comping as if it's like a big band horn section. So if that doesn't really connect to you, you might need to listen to some more big band stuff, but just the accents and the kind of feel of like a whole horn section, like da 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 ba da da. Like you want to kind of get a full feeling of that, and we're just trying to imitate it on guitar. So let's just practice this, what I'm calling beyond the Charleston rhythm. And I'll just play it at 90. We'll loop it. You guys can just jump in yourselves on mute. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 3, and 4. 1, and 3, and 4. And 3, and 4. And 3, and 4. With the thumb. You can try things like sliding in. And you can also try different voicings. But the purpose here is just the rhythm. 1, and 3, and 4. 1, All right. the first two chords of this should have a feeling of like long, short, like da da da, that kind of feel. So does anyone want to play for it? I know Fred just did. Does anyone want to give it a go? Try playing it. Max.
Yeah. How about this? 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it.
I really like your big band analogy, and it emphasizes the second of the two quarter notes, and makes it. I think your intent is that it be, you know, a little bit on the staccato side. Is that correct? The second of the two quarter notes of the eighth notes.
Yes. Yes.
In other words, you don't hold that as you would maybe in a bossa.
Yeah. Correct. Yeah, I feel like the thinking as if you're a big band horn section gives it's an easier way of getting the accents correct.
Yeah.
So some things can just sound. Sometimes the comping that a beginner will do sounds odd, not because the rhythm's wrong, but the accents are off. And so sometimes we need to fix both of those things. So play certain things short that should have been held longer, and vice versa. So there's a lot to adjust there, but the first problem I usually see is just not knowing what to do beyond this first rhythm. And even more generally, talking about improvisation, which we'll get in tomorrow, is having lines that always start on a downbeat and not being comfortable starting things on the upbeat. So just a big general thing that, say, a beginner intermediate player struggles with, whether they know it or not, is confidently starting on upbeats, like really knowing how to place a note, whether it's a chord or a note in a solo, on an upbeat confidently. So this is fixing that for us on the comping side. All right, so we have two possibilities here, right? We could just do the Charleston endlessly, and we can do this other one kind of in a loop, and they both sound fine as far as driving that forward. Now, beyond that, we can start to combine these rhythms. So this is when we start to get a little more comfortable with it. So we're going to start with the Charleston, and then for the second measure, go into this other rhythm starting on the upbeat. So let me play this one for us. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1, 3, 4. 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1, 2, and 3, 4. Right? So you want to really get that da da ba da da ba da 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 where you start to feel you can kind of easily go between each of those. Any questions about combining these?
I have a question for comping in general.
Okay.
I couldn't see if you're playing it with your finger or with a pick, but if you play it with a pick, do you need a soft one? Because if you play lines, we take a thick one. Most people take a thick one, but for comping,
I was using a pick for that, so I use a heavy pick, like a Fender heavy. Sometimes I use a medium, but generally I prefer the heavy for soloing, like you're suggesting. A lot of it comes down to your attack. So not being so perpendicular to the string, but tilting so that the pick more easily slides across. If I feel like I need to do a softer thing, then I transition my pick between my index and middle, and then I'll use my thumb. which with a quick switch here of like from that to this, it pretty. That's pick, thumb. But I never have an issue, especially with the volume. If my attack like needs to be really heavy, like sometimes for things that are faster, this is outside of this kind of comping style, but say we're doing like a fast, like Freddie Green, where I really want to get like that percussive sound, I'll turn down so that I can dig in more to get a heavier attack. So like I won't go like, because then it's just way too loud for that. I'll turn this down so it's like, so I can just get that kind of and then I can balance the note that's coming out with the percussive attack. So yeah.
Thank you.
Any questions about the rhythmic aspect, Peter?
Yeah, you're basically strumming the whole chord, right? All strings.
Yes.
Instead of a 3-string voicing.
For what we're doing right now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so sometimes, like in this case, if I'm doing this chord, and I want that E to ring on top, I let my pinky or my index, it's actually the back of my index finger, mute the first string so that I get that. I'm strumming all the way to the E string, but it's actually muted. If I wanted to play with that melody, I could, or it's the same voicing, I'm just changing slight muting on my left hand. This is strumming basically the whole thing, maybe starting on the 5th string, but it could honestly strum the whole guitar because my index finger is muting up here.
Yeah.
So I like to do it where I'm not having to think so much about an exact start or end point for my strum, and just control it all from my left hand, so that this can strum and really just focus on the groove part. Like this can just be here getting the time and the groove, and I'm changing what I need to do with my left hand to get the notes that I want heard. So if I need to mute certain things, or I don't want to have to, like, especially when it doesn't really affect it, like it's just a difference of me putting my index finger up a little bit to mute that E string. There's no reason I can't do that in pretty much every situation. So thanks for the question. All right, so let's look at the next step of that. So that was starting with the Charleston, and then next measure doing this other rhythm, right? Starting on the upbeat. Going beyond that, we want to get comfortable with this in changing our chords as well. So let's look at this with 2 voicings that we were doing yesterday. So this is D minor 7 with the Charleston rhythm, and then we switch to the G13. Fix this one. So let me demonstrate. 1, 2, 3, 4. 3, 4, 1. 3, 4, 1, and 3 and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. A key thing here is just being as precise as you can, as confident as you can in placing that beat. So even if you're wrong, don't guess about it, don't hesitate about it. Really make sure you're like, no, it's here. Ba-da. Ba-da-da. Because any sort of hesitation just immediately kills the feel of the time and the groove. And that's another part of why beginner and intermediate players struggle with this, is because they're not yet confident because they don't have as much experience. So it's really important for comping here to just, you're supposed to be placing these chords and really defining, like, this is the downbeat, this is the upbeat, and I, as the accompanist, know where those are. So I'm creating that time for you. All right, so just let's try this. Let's do it again at 90. I'll kind of loop it and you guys can play with me. 1, 2, 3, 4. 3, 4, 1. 1, 2, and 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 3, 4, 1. You can try and change your dynamics, so you try and go softer while still holding the time, or with the thumb. All right, Max.
Again, Chase, emphasizing the last of the eighth notes, just it brings it to life, and offers some, some energy to the lick. Either one of these over time could get a little bit tiring, but when you hit that eighth note the way you do it, bam, do ba,
Yeah.
ba da da.
Yeah.
Definitely big band stuff.
Yeah, it's like a surprise hit. Like it has to have a little bit of an impact.
Yes.
But those upbeats. One thing that I've been noticing, I don't have anything. It's not a hard and fast rule, but in lines, like in phrases, and in comping, most of the time we want an upbeat either starting the phrase or ending the phrase. Sometimes both. But you rarely see a phrase or a rhythmic phrase in a comping or line that starts and ends on a downbeat, at least in jazz, because it's too plodding feeling. Like it doesn't give us that forward motion that the upbeat does. And so that is something that we see a lot with comping, especially, is that there's almost too many downbeats because the players aren't yet comfortable playing things on upbeats constantly. So having that ending of an upbeat is really the focus here, right? We have, no matter whether we're starting on a downbeat or ending on a downbeat, this first pattern, the Charleston, starts on the downbeat, ends on the upbeat.
Mm-hmm.
So then, and then the second one, we start on an upbeat and we end on the upbeat. We could have done this, right? Like what if I did this pattern as like this? So let me just look at this pattern right here. So it'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. It kind of kills the momentum right there, right? So like 3, 4, 1, 2. It feels like really heavy and dies, right?
Yeah.
So we avoid that by having this da ending on that upbeat.
Mm-hmm.
Your focus should always be feeling that, like that upbeat part, like that's what drives it forward, and keeps that motion. Other questions or comments? Peter.
The tricky thing for me is getting back from the G, the last end of the bar, back to the 1 on the D -7.
Yeah.
It feels like it's coming quick.
Okay, so yeah, there isn't too much time, right? Is it the actual movement?
No, it's the timing.
Okay. Yeah, so we have so let me
get half a count.
3, 4, 1. Yeah. So when I'm doing this, one thing that I really like doing as far as just getting this cleaner so you feel like you have more time is when you're moving from one chord to another or having trouble, like say in this case, it feels like there's not enough time. Really notice how each finger needs to move to get back into its position or to the next chord. In this case, it's a loop. So if we're on the G13, my first finger kind of leads this, sliding up into the D. That starts. And then as I'm moving, you can see these other two fingers form into the D minor 7 so that it's ready. So it's like,
yeah, it's not the chord or the fingering, it's really the rhythm. If I had to do it clapping, it would be difficult as well, I think. I have to get used to the sound.
yeah, do you mind trying it clapping? Let's see. I'll bring up the rhythm for you, just so I can help you out with it. So if we're like at this tempo, I'll do it with you. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1 and 2. 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1 and 3 and 4. 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1 and 3 and 4. Yeah, you just have one hit. You have one click, and then you're back.
Yeah.
Da 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 da. Yeah, it really is getting used to the what that rhythm feels like at different tempos, right? So like it does feel different at 90 than if I do this at 120. 2, 3, 4. Ba, ba, da, 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 ba, ba. But then it starts to all feel like one pattern instead of like two separate ones. So Fred, did you have a question?
No.
Okay.
It's okay.
I just saw you were unmuted, so I thought you did. All right, now let's do these flipped.
Yeah, I was trying to sing it, and it's a bit difficult. Yes.
Yeah.
Instead of clapping, I was trying to sing.
Yeah, singing with it can be good. I would just keep the like top note. So like the ba bum ba ba dum ba bum ba ba dum. That's probably what you could also do the bass note as well, but I would kind of focus on the melody. So let's flip these. So now we're going to do the other rhythm first and then the Charleston rhythm second, so that we're getting practice on both. So this would sound like, let me go back to 90. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 3, 4. 1, 4. 1, 3, and 4. 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1 and 2, 3 and 4. 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1 and 2. So you can start to add things while keeping this feel by changing different melody notes. The whole time, I'm just trying to keep that feel though of the da 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 da. How do you guys feel about this combination as opposed to the other one? Max?
I actually like this one a little better. It's probably just a matter of choice, but the having the D minor come in on the offbeat, and then the G13 sort of concludes the little phrase.
Yeah, it's gonna. We're looking at it pretty isolated with this loop. It really will depend on everything that comes before and after this, how it was set up. But yeah, it does have a little bit different feel. For Peter, this might give you a little bit more time in switching back, right? So you might find this one easier for that reason. Sometimes people find it more difficult because they're immediately starting on an upbeat. So this is also good practice for that if you struggle with getting that upbeat feel, because you have to get the ba da da right off the bat. So both of those. Let's try and do the same thing now, but in a different spot. We're going to do it in a 2-5 to E flat. So this F minor the B flat 13. So it's the first pattern we did, starting with the Charleston rhythm, and then doing the other rhythm. But now we're going to do it over F minor, B flat 13. So I'll play this at 90 again. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1. 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1, 2, 4. 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, 3. All right. Anyone want to give this one a go? Play it for us. Yeah. Yes, Pierre, try the second rhythm again, the B flat one. Yeah, so you want this second one you're hitting, you want it to be less accented. And right now it's coming across more accent. So you want it like ba da 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 da. Yeah, ba da. Yeah, that's better. Yeah. So we want to emphasize that upbeat part of it.
Okay.
Cool. All right, and now let's switch to another voicing. Still Charleston rhythm, and then the other, but now we're going to do it 2/5 to A flat. So we're switching our voicings to get more practice and just reinforce what we did yesterday. So this is B flat minor, and then E flat 13. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1. 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, and 3, 4. Bless you, Max. 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. So, how are you guys feeling about this rhythm so far? Is this making sense?
Yeah, rather cool.
Cool.
Yeah, in my case, Chase, it's going to take a while till I can actually switch rhythms from one measure to the next. If I get stuck with the traditional Charleston, I'm going to tend to not move it to a different rhythm in the next measure, and then back and forth. But the rhythms are fabulous. Thank you.
Yeah. So to that point, we really want to internalize these. So you're not really thinking like, oh, this is a dotted quarter note and then followed by 2/8 notes. You really want to just do this enough times that you're feeling what that rhythm sounds like. So you're just like with the Charleston, no one's really counting like, oh, it's a dotted quarter and then 8th note. You just go da 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 da. Same thing here. We want to have the da 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 da, and just be basically alternating between them, doing 2 in a row of them, however we're feeling.
Yeah. Okay. The two really fit well together.
Yeah, the reason I picked these, like this one, is for this specific purpose. Some rhythms don't necessarily work on their own, doing them twice in a row, or in any combination with the Charleston rhythm. But this one works before the Charleston rhythm, after it, or even on its own. So it's really good to add, because then we have, before we just had the Charleston rhythm, now we have this one by itself, and then we have it also in combination before or after, right? So instead of just having one, we have at least 4 possible variations. And really just right from that, as the chords are shifting, because like we saw above, you could start on different rhythms and get a whole totally different set if you're going through a chorus. Even just with this one thing added, it's like 4 times the rhythmic variety, at least, that we're doing here.
Yeah.
So you get a lot of bang for your buck, basically, by adding this one in. And obviously there's a ton of rhythms. Yeah, Peter.
So can we practice this playing along with a backing track or with the rhythm, or do we have to use a metronome? And because I have the feeling using metronome is a bit more difficult than playing along.
Yeah, you could totally use a backing track. So you could take something that you're used to like playing over, maybe say take the A train or something, and then play through these rhythms where each of them is like a measure, right? So like if I did the A section, 1, 2, 3, 4. Two of those in a row. Switch. There I was switching mid measure, so for D minor, and then the 2 8th notes G13. So I'm just keeping that feel, those feels. I kind of changed the rhythm there. Again. You can do that with the backing track or by yourself as well. Both are great. Let me see if I had anything else on this. Yeah. So that's it as far as what I want you guys to get out of the rhythm. Any questions about that? Any other final questions or comments?
Well, the only comments that I have is that in between classes, we have that much time to practice, eh?
Yeah. No, it's true. It's true. Yeah, so for the sake of this thing, it's really just to show people this in 7 days so they can see that there's a lot here, even on simple kind of topics. So I'm not expecting anyone to master this per se, but really just get introduced to the concept. Okay, I have the Charleston rhythm, and maybe just from this you learn this other rhythm, da da da, and then you'll spend time practicing that as we do other things. And
does it have a name, this rhythm?
I don't know that it has a specific name. Really, some rhythms have specific names, like say the Charleston rhythm, yeah. But then beyond that, they're really just categorized as various swing rhythms. Right. Unless they were, say a bossa rhythm, a samba, like different ones from different cultures specifically. But not that I know of. Yeah. And what we do here rhythmically is going to be reinforced in the next few days. And in the chord melody we look at the end is going to use some of these same rhythms. That's partly why we go over this, is so we're going to keep getting used to that. That's, again, the whole concept and method for these 7 days is that each time what we're doing is reinforcing previous days. So it's just building on those topics. like today we were reinforcing some of the voicings that we looked at yesterday. And then tomorrow we're going to switch to improvising, but we'll reinforce that by connecting them to these voicing shapes that we just did. Right. So it'll all build from that. So you'll get practice with it, and then, you know, mastery will take some more time.
Sound good?
Thanks, Pierre. Any other comments or questions?
Thank you.
Thanks, Fred. All right. So the previous 2 days, we were looking at some chords, some harmonic ideas, right? Basically focusing on comping. So certain chord voicings, and then also on day 2, rhythms that we can use to kind of expand beyond just the basics for that. So hopefully you found those couple of things useful. The next 3 days, so starting today through day 5, we're going to look at some broad concepts for improvising. There's not, you know, a lot we can really integrate in 3 days and just transform your improvising. So I'm not claiming we're going to just, you're going to be a killing soloist after this. One sec. So yeah, I'm not claiming that we're going to be masters at improvising after this, but there are 3 concepts that I think we can go over that will really change some of your perspective on improvising, and that you can start to implement to see progress. So each of these days, these concepts will be there. So let me just kind of give you that overview of what those concepts are, and then you can see that in what we're doing. So if you guys are familiar with some of my teaching, you probably have heard some of this before. The first one is making sure that when we're coming up with any sort of solo idea, could be a melodic idea, could be a arpeggio, scale, line, whatever, anything we're going to use for soloing, we want to connect it to the chord in that same area. So we want to connect the idea to a certain chord shape, right? So that's the first one that I see, that I don't see people really talk about, is having that kind of framework. And the benefit of this is that when we change key, say we're doing on C major 7 and now we're doing it on F major, we can quickly access that same idea because we're tying it to that shape. And this is helpful, especially at a beginner intermediate stage where you probably don't know all the notes across the whole fretboard, and that part takes a lot of time to process. So we can do some things to help us out as we're learning those notes and still play in a way as if we already know what those notes are. So that's the first one, connecting your ideas to the chord shape. The second one is making sure that we know how to play ideas ascending and descending. So many times I see players that really know one or the other a lot better than whichever one they don't know as well. So they can ascend up an arpeggio, but then in the descending side, they don't quite know what to do. And so a lot of times when I see improvisers get stuck with their ideas, it's because they reach a certain point where then they don't know how to get out of there, right? They go up high and then they don't know how to get down from that position. That's probably the most common one I see. Although it can happen in reverse, where you learn a lot of ideas that are coming down a certain pattern and then you're low and you don't know how to get back up. So that's the second thing we're going to address, is making sure we know how to ascend and descend in ways that connect us back and forth. So we can come up with ideas and we can go up to an area and then come back to it, go up to it while we generate new melodic ideas. And then the third thing is thinking in terms of vocabulary instead of scales. And this one is kind of what takes you to the intermediate and advanced levels. Just in the same way as I'm talking right now, I'm not really thinking about the letters in each of the words that I'm saying. I'm just speaking from certain ideas and phrases that I've already learned and used. It's really that same concept. So if we're stuck in trying to think, oh, I can play this note and then this note and then that note, we're never really going to say anything, especially in time. And that is a big limitation with us improvising, is the chords are changing. After 4 beats, you might have a new chord. After 2 beats, you might have a new chord. So we need to have a reactive, basically not instinctual, but we need to be so familiar with the vocabulary that it comes across without us thinking too hard about it. So all of that is the kind of the three main concepts we're going to dig into. So let's get into the actual first one that we're going to look at. And this is that idea of connecting the shape to our idea. And again, this is bringing back some of the stuff we looked at in days 1 and 2. So we're going to use those same voicings we were looking at and just reinforce that. And so today we're going to look at some ascending arpeggio patterns for these shapes that we were learning. All right, and we're going to start off, we'll spend some time so we can actually practice it, so you guys can actually go through, ask me any questions if you have any difficulties with playing through these. But they're all pretty straightforward. I have the fingering that I like to use notated up here. There are different fingerings, so if you have a question about the fingering or you have a certain fingering you like to use, feel free to ask me about it. But this first one we're looking at, the C major 7 down here. And then while I'm playing that, I want to be able to then visualize this chord as I play. So I might play through the chord, then play the arpeggio, play the chord again. Do it really slow. You want to make sure you see each of these parts. A few things if you're more of a beginner. You can, I'm a big proponent of saying and playing the notes as you're going through. So you could go play that and then go C, E, G, at whatever tempo is right for you. B, C, E, G, B. If you're still trying to learn the notes, that will help a lot in learning the notes and really internalizing these. And just knowing the notes of whatever chord we're on, right? So if you're still learning what notes are in C major 7, C, E, G, B, C, E, G, B. And then you could do it backwards as well, but we're just looking at the ascending part for this. Right. For this, the idea is really just to learn the shape for this arpeggio. There's not any sort of tempo that I care about you guys playing it at or anything like that. And I didn't notate the picking because at this point, it's not even about what picking you're using. That's getting a little bit too in depth on some of the detail when I like making sure we're focused on whatever the thing is we're learning. So here, the goal is learning this arpeggio shape. And once you know this, then we could discuss the picking. But if you're trying to think about the fingering, the shape, and then the chord we're on, the notes, and the picking, like you're too overwhelmed. All right, so any questions about this first one? You guys all good with this? Cool. So then let's look at the second C major 7 arpeggio shape we have. So you might do this one, play through that, and then you go up to the C major 7 up here. And you should notice it's very similar shape. This is why I picked these specific chord voicings, is the fingering and the shape are almost identical. The one difference here would be in this middle portion. I like using 2 and then 2 for this first arpeggio. And then here you don't want to use 2 and 2 because you'll run out of fingers for the rest of this. So there's a little bit of a fingering change, but the general shape is the same for both of these. So it should feel very similar playing through both of these.
Question.
Yeah, Pierre.
Well, what about instead of on the E string? Can you finish the line on the E string?
Yeah, you could keep going. You definitely could keep going for that. I would do probably again this 8 and 12 if you're going to stay in position. Another way that it could be, it really depends on what you're trying to do after this. Sometimes I'll slide the pinky up to C and then use my third finger to hit E on the 12th fret. And then that almost allows you again to slide up to G if you need, like. But usually if I'm in this position, I'm not doing that kind of thing. I might get to that point and then play something else that would get me higher. Maybe like an A minor 7 to get up to that G.
All right.
So yeah, usually when we're playing these kind of arpeggios in an improvised setting, 2 octaves tend to be the maximum that you'll see. If we're going to continue to ascend, what you'll see is using other arpeggios that fit over this chord, C major 7. So we might go into an A minor 7 arpeggio or an E minor 7 arpeggio to continue going up. But you don't normally see it like 2+ octaves of the same exact arpeggio. And even seeing it in 2 octaves directly is a little bit rare. These are all things I'm just kind of noticing as I'm working towards our essential jazz vocab and going through all these transcriptions. So far, I haven't really seen like beyond a 2 octave at all. So, okay, so what we're going to do after this, we have these major 7s, is apply the same shape to the dominant 7 chords that we were looking at before and the minor 7. And again, we're going to basically keep this shape, except now that we're going to a dominant 7, the 7th, the B, is going to be a B flat. So shape basically stays the same, but you're going to notice, oh, that B has to be a B flat here. So we're back at C7. So then I have to B flat there. Sometimes you can play these as a triplet. Again, I don't really care about what you guys do rhythmically for this. It's just about getting this shape together, really visualizing it over the chord. That's like the main goal here. And another thing I should mention is, at first you might be looking at this sheet online here or with whatever printout you might have. But the goal is definitely to do it and learn it while looking at the fretboard. So once you kind of understand what the notes are here, practice it by looking at your fretboard like I'm doing here. So I'm trying to visualize all of those notes, all of that pattern. And I'm not really thinking about the fret numbers or the notes even. I'm just seeing the shape, like where I need to press to get that. Yeah, so looking at your hand is good. Again, just really focus on the ascending portion. Yeah, let's just take a minute just to make sure everyone's caught up with this and just practice through the C7 arpeggio or the major 7 ones. If you're good with that, you can just play through the chord, arpeggio, and so on. Just like a couple minutes. Okay, let's take a look at the next one. And so this is the C7 around the 8th fret. Again, same basic shape. These should all feel pretty much the same with just a slight change in the 7th fret now. I think the dominant 7 one probably feels the most comfortable. We have fewer big stretches because we don't have that major 7th. So everything kind of fits in a 4 fret span. And one way that we might extend this to the E string is not even going to the C at this point. We're going up to like the D as like a 9th. That usually will sound really good. Up to D right there. So that kind of gets to my point of what I was saying to Pierre is at a certain point, especially as we get higher up, we tend to use some more of the extensions instead of just doing the exact C7 arpeggio consistently, right? We might go C7 and then I might do DF.
I see.
That just sounds better than doing consistently. We like our ear wants a little bit of a change from there. Something.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. Getting up to one of those. So that's for C7 on this higher spot. And now let's look at minor 7. So now it's just one change from what we did with dominant. So now our major third is a minor third. The shape here does feel different because when we had the major third, we immediately go to the next string. For the minor third, because that moves down a half step, it's actually going to be more comfortable to stay on the same string to keep in this chord shape. So this one does feel a little bit different. C minor. Even though the shape is different, this tends to be a very comfortable arpeggio to play on guitar because of these 3 in a row on consecutive strings. You can pretty easily do those as all down picks or down, up, down, down. So we have like this. Doing that. If the kind of sweep picking is uncomfortable, feel free to alternate pick through that. But I just figured I'd point that out. Those couple of spots between here and here, you can sweep. And then also usually these two as a down, down to get this kind of. I'm doing up, down, 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 up, down, down, up. And that also works for the other C minor 7. The only difference here is we have this 2 notes on the same fret, like 8th fret, 8th fret. I like using 2 different fingerings for this. You could roll if that feels more comfortable to you. So you could use first finger. I'm looking at this one. First finger for this E flat and first finger for this G. So you could roll here. Let me demonstrate that so you can actually see my hands. So I'm looking at this C minor 7. The arpeggio we have is. Now, once I get to this next octave, I have E flat. I like kind of turning my wrist and putting my middle finger under here and then getting my pinky. So each of those notes is a different finger. Third, first, second, fourth. You could use third, first, and then flatten the knuckle so it's like a roll. to get the G, and then use that. If I'm doing this as like a sweep, I might do the roll. That tends to be smooth and pretty fast. But if I don't want to do it for whatever reason in what I'm soloing, you get more control by making sure each note is played by its own finger without rolling, just because we don't really have much control over the note or the articulation and the sustain when our knuckles down, when we're kind of playing it on like the mid part, not even the pad, but just like the mid part of the finger. Either one is valid though, if you do the roll or if you use your finger. All right, so let's spend a little bit of time just going through these arpeggios. You can do the C minor 7 ones, or if you're already comfortable with these, feel free to just refresh all of the ones, the major 7, dominant, and minor 7. We'll just take like, say 3 minutes to do that. Okay, cool. So any questions about these shapes or arpeggios? How are they feeling to you guys?
Actually, the last one is very smooth because when I attack it, because well, I follow a mini bar, like it flow directly.
Yeah. Cool. Any other comments or questions? All right. So the next step of this, which you can get into on your own, is really then understanding how we can just take these shapes and move them to different keys, right? To different places. And I don't want to get too far into this just because then it becomes a little bit outside of the scope of this more beginner level series. But let's take this C minor 7 as an example, right? We did this C minor 7 here, and then we're just doing that same arpeggio, right? One way to really see if you understand that as the idea, the shape connected to the chord, is to do it for a different chord. So instead of C minor 7, keep the same shape, but let's switch it to G minor 7, right? So now I'm down here. Now you should be able to just kind of play that same muscle memory pattern of that arpeggio and get that G minor 7 arpeggio. To get that, right? If you can't, then you need to go back to just the C minor 7 and really make sure you're understanding how that shape feels in your hand. And I would do that for any of the main, you can pick randomly, but basically you do it C minor 7, G minor 7, F minor 7, D minor 7, B flat minor 7, ones that we commonly see in different jazz standards. One way I wouldn't do it is just like going down or up by a single fret is less helpful. So when you're doing that, it is better to jump around by like a fourth or a fifth, because that really tests much better whether you have it in your hands. We're switching the stretch a little bit more with the fingers. If we just go up by half step, it feels almost exactly the same, and we're not really visualizing it in that same way. So like after G minor 7, let's try B flat minor 7 on the 6th fret. And again, I'm really just trying to visualize that shape over this position. Sometimes I'll even just play a portion of the 2-octave arpeggio, so not even the whole thing, just maybe this. Or this. And I'll lead into other ideas. That's ways you can develop it on your own in your practice routine once you get comfortable with that on its own. So after B flat minor 7, we might go to F minor 7. Try it all the way down here. There, I like rolling because that feels awkward to get my finger turned on there. So you discover other things like that, other technical limitations depending on what position you're in, where it actually changes. So like down here, F minor 7, I'm gonna roll that because this starts to turn my hand into the tuning pegs. And then maybe up here, D minor 7. Again, the same exact shape. We're just trying to reinforce the shape, the chord, and that arpeggio. So yeah, those are some good ones to do. C minor 7, G minor 7, B flat minor, F minor, and then D minor. Again, in that order, so you really are jumping around and testing yourself instead of just going C minor, D minor, B flat minor, etc. Any final questions about any of what we've worked on or discussed?
I like it.
Cool. It's fair. So yeah, in the next couple of days, we'll do other aspects of this, not with the arpeggio, but we'll connect it to some 2-note per string scales so we can actually start to play some ideas. Now, we have an ascending pattern. Now we need a descending pattern. So that was the second part of what I was discussing at the beginning. And then on day 5, we'll connect them. So tomorrow we'll learn a new one so that we can have something else to play, and then we'll connect them together so you could practice this as a loop and really just make sure whatever chord shape you're playing for these basic chords, without having to think about the scale, what's a C major 7 in this position, or etc. You can just play through the arpeggio and this 2-note per string thing, and you'll have plenty of notes to come up with melodic ideas. So that is our goal for the next 2 days. All right, guys, I will see you tomorrow, hopefully. Welcome back, guys. So this is day 4, and this is our second day doing improvisation. So we're going to look at another technique for improvising over these three main chord types. We're looking at major 7, dominant 7, and minor 7. And this will still relate to those voicings that we were looking at. And then tomorrow we'll combine it with what we did yesterday to get an ascending and descending pattern for these chords. So we can have a really good sense of creating the sound of each of these chords without having to think too much about, changing any sort of scale or just getting confused with that. This will create the sound of the chord in a pretty simple way to understand. So yesterday we looked at the arpeggios, and today we are going to look at another concept for our descending side. So if you guys are familiar with some of the other things I've shown or talked about, like the scarpeggios, you'll know that on the descending side, one thing I like doing is this 2-note per string descending pattern. And usually when I'm doing it, I'm thinking about it connecting to whatever sort of scale I want to imply. And as I was going through this, what I was finding was a simpler way of kind of approaching it at the beginning is just thinking about this as a pentatonic, because pentatonics have these 2-note per string pattern already. And most people that are familiar with guitar, have played it for a year or two, are familiar with the pentatonics. So what's great about this is it also limits a little bit of what we have to learn. So the pentatonic that we're going to do for major 7 is actually the exact same one that we'll do for dominant 7. And so that keeps things a little bit simpler. So for major 7, C major 7, we're going to descend on the C major pentatonic. You might also know this as A minor pentatonic. I actually think about it more as A minor pentatonic, but for the purpose of this, just connecting that it's C major 7 and C major pentatonic. Those are the same. So let's just play through this, and I'll give us some other ideas for it. So again, play the chord to get the sound in your ear, and then just go through this scale. You can continue this all the way down to the low E string if you want. I'm just trying to keep it simple by keeping it one measure. Fingering wise, I tend to use just 3 and 1 for these kind of pentatonic positions. And then occasionally, if it gets lower here, like on the 4th string to 6th string, when I'm below the 5th fret, that's usually when I'll switch to using my pinky. But you can use 1 and 4 or 1 and 3, depending on your hand size and what position you're in. So that's why I didn't put fingering for this, because it is really a bit personal on this, depending on how far you can stretch. So just basically playing that. One other thing to work on here is try and think about these as also starting on an upbeat. So they're all laid out starting on a downbeat, but it is also helpful to hear this as if it starts on an upbeat. So say I'm playing this 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. That's when it starts to feel a little bit more like a swing-based pattern. If we do it all as starting on downbeats, it can feel a little heavy on the downbeats, just like we talked about with the rhythm, and it doesn't have as much forward motion as if we started on an upbeat. So just that little shift can make something that sounds a little bit boring or obvious. It sounds a little bit better as far as a line. So we can do that for this C major 7, and it's the same scale, just in a different pentatonic position when we move up to the next C major 7. And I'm trying to keep these exactly the same so you can really see the relationship here. You could do this starting on the 1st string, going all the way down to the E string. So you could start off like on D and C and go all the way down to C. That's fine as well, but I really want you to see that pattern is the same as this one, so that we can keep making these same connections to again, just limit the amount of stuff we're trying to learn, so we actually learn it. And for these, if you're not familiar, I like doing down up for the picking on this, since it's 2 notes. That way my up pick is always ending as the last pick on each string. That's my personal preference as far as picking style for this. Any questions about this so far? You guys good with the pentatonic positions and stuff?
That's the first I understand immediately because I know the pentatonic.
Perfect. So Dieter, this is what we'll build off of then. Bill, if you're understanding this, like as far as pentatonics, that's really good to know for yourself, because then just anything that we're learning around this, try and find that pentatonic position that's there and just keep building off of that.
Fine.
Great. So let's do the same thing. It's the same pentatonic, but now let's play the C7 to give us the sound of the dominant chord, C7, and hear how this sounds great over it. But we're not playing the 7th in this. We're not playing the B or the B flat, so that's why it works out for both. So C7. And again, try and see that pentatonic position in the context of where that chord is. So if you had to move shape, you could still play that pentatonic. So we do that one. And then C7. This C7. For the dominant chord, this really gives us a nice sound of like the C13 because it has that A in there. And it's, again, pretty simple to play that. It's just 2 notes per string. So let's just take a few minutes, maybe like 3 to 4 minutes, play through either of the major 7 voicings and then the major pentatonic, and then the C7 voicings, same major pentatonic. Just make sure you got that in your hands, and then we'll move on to the minor 7 portion. All right, so C major pentatonic covers us for major 7 and dominant 7. And then minor 7, we're going to do C minor pentatonic. Now, there are different pentatonics we could use over these chords, but that definitely gets out of the scope of what we're trying to do here. I'm just really trying to show you that these are the main pentatonics that cover this sound of the chord. And then, yeah, we can superimpose other ones and do a lot of other cool stuff as we get more advanced beyond this. So let's go back to this C minor 7 down here. And now we're doing C minor pentatonic in this position. And this is really helpful because this C minor pentatonic actually has all of the notes in this chord, right? We have the C, the E flat, the G, and the B flat. So this addresses every note in there. Whereas the C major pentatonic for the major 7 and the dominant 7, we were avoiding the 7th. We don't have the 7th in this scale pattern. We had the C, the E, and the G that form that major triad. But we're just basically ignoring the sound of the 7th, which is fine. It doesn't clash with anything. We're just not playing it. And then C minor 7, though, with C minor pentatonic, we're addressing every single one of the chord tones. So I like playing the chord before and afterward as well. So we're just really trying to get that sound in our ears. Yeah, Peter.
Oh, I noticed that you don't start and don't end on the root notes. Right?
Yeah. So we can. Again, I'm really just trying to keep this as a. I wanted two things. I wanted to make sure that this just fits in one little measure, so we could just really pretty easily loop it, and make sure it's getting the main part of the scale that we might use in soloing, and then also keeping this pattern in a range that also is exactly the same for the other voicing we have.
Okay. Yeah.
So I didn't start. If I started, say, with this C minor that's up here, if I start on the E string, we'd start on like E flat and C, but then we don't have that high E flat or C in this voicing. So the shape would be a little bit different. And so I'm trying to keep that in mind so that both of these patterns for C minor really have the same feel, so that you can quickly get that in your fingers. Same with these other ones. So they both start on A. All of these are exactly the same, starting on A. For that same reason, because this voicing goes up higher, we would start with a higher note if you're trying to do it all over.
Clear. Thanks.
Yeah, good question. So yeah, do it in this first position. And then we want to do it higher up. The other thing is, by actually leaving that E flat, we can then play the root and then play the chord after that to finalize the sound. So doing that is also helpful. So let's move up to the 8th fret for this C minor 7. And that one's just your standard first position pentatonic. One thing I'll point out again as far as the picking here, because the first note in this pattern that I've done for this minor is just one note on that string. So I would start with an up pick. So that is, again, the up pick should be the last pick on a string if you're moving to another string. So that means if we just have one note on that string, we start with an up pick. See you, Dieter. And then for the rest of it, if you're going to play two notes on that pentatonic, down, up. All right. So let's just take a minute or two, say 2 minutes. and just play through these minor ones, and then we'll reconvene. Okay. Any questions about these ones? Seems like you guys are set on the pentatonics.
Yeah. Interesting comment when doing the minor 7, and if you close it with this C minor, it gives you a nice closure.
Yeah, you mean like playing right after the scale?
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. I think it's like what Peter was saying. It's missing that last final root. So then that E flat really wants to finish with the root there. Yeah. Any other comments, questions?
I did not get the thing with the upbeat when you have one string, when you start with one string, then you make an upstroke or what?
Yeah, so let me explain that. So for the pentatonic, it's generally 2 notes per string, right? Let's just take this C minor. And whether I'm going ascending or descending, we'll do descending since that's what we're doing. If I have 2 notes, I'm going to do down and then up. So my last pick on that string is always up. That kind of down, up, right? If I just have the one note, say I'm starting on C, I'm just going to start with an up pick. And that's because if I do a down pick, you see how my pick is traveling in the opposite direction of where I need to go next? Because I'm moving my pick down, but then I need to come back to the second string.
Yes.
So that's not very efficient. I should do an up pick, which takes me to the second string, and now I'm ready to play that much short. It's just a shorter distance for my pick to travel, which allows for an easier time playing faster if you want to play faster, or just playing more smoothly, more accurately. So yeah, if it's just one note on the string, start with the up pick. It's a little bit contrary to one thing I should just clarify is sometimes people will explain it as like if it's on a downbeat, play the down pick, or an upbeat and play an up pick. What I found is it has a lot less to do with that. And it's more, at least in this style, it has a lot more. My picking improved when I kind of got away from that idea and was focused more on this part, like the efficiency of the pick. What's the next thing I'm playing? And how does that relate to whether I should play a down or an up pick?
I got it.
Great. Cool. So that's really it for day 4. And then tomorrow we're going to combine what we did with the ascending arpeggio, and then we're going to come down the pentatonics we were just working on so that we can generate the whole sound of the chord by doing that. So if we're on C7, we would go up the arpeggio and then down that pentatonic. And then we can kind of keep looping that. Right? That's basically going to be the idea. And then from there, we can come up with a bunch of creative ideas. But again, I'm not thinking about a certain scale. We're not talking about like C mixolydian or anything like that. It's a certain pattern up and it's another pattern down, and then we play around with melodic ideas from there. So that's what we'll get into tomorrow with day 5. And then after that, we look at our chord melody that puts all this together. Welcome to day 5, guys. So we're going to finish up what we're looking at with improvisation and put the previous 2 days into combination, working together in today's lesson. And then tomorrow we'll start our chord melody. And so that's going to be the last 2 days. We'll look at how all of this that we've done combines into a bit of a chord melody, which I've broken down into 2 different days so we can spend some time on that. So let's get started putting this all together in our day 5. All right. So just as a recap, day 3, we were looking at these arpeggios. And day 4, we were looking at these pentatonics descending. So now we're going to look at both of them together. So starting with this C major 7.
Excuse me, Chase.
Yeah, Fred.
I don't remember that I saw the day 4 in your class.
It should be there now. I put it up this morning.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Yeah, so it should be there now. Thanks for the reminder, though. I appreciate it. Sometimes I do forget. Yeah, so we're looking at the same C major 7 voicing, right? And we're going up the arpeggio. And then right from there, we're going to come down our C major pentatonic. So this is also why I chose these certain pentatonics. I know Peter was asking about these before, like why I wasn't starting on the first string for some or certain notes, is because I had in mind we're connecting them to these arpeggios, and I wanted to keep those parts exactly the same so that they fit together. So let's just play through this. So you want to play the chord. You want to then visualize that arpeggio, and then visualize our 2 note per string pentatonic descending. And because we end on that E, you can really just loop this so that E can start back at the arpeggio with C. So you can really just kind of keep playing this. See, there's arpeggio up, scale down. Let's just take a couple minutes just so we can get used to that and loop it together. So just a couple minutes of playing through this arpeggio and the pentatonic. All right. Any questions about this? Does this make sense how to connect them?
I just wanted to ask you, how would you describe the different flavor between the arpeggio and the pentatonic? Is there any feel that you have that you would say, ah, that's pentatonic and that's an arpeggio?
Yeah, so the main difference, at least for this major seven, is that with the arpeggio, we actually get the major seventh.
Yes.
So it has a little bit more complex of a sound because it has that major seventh. We get that kind of sound. Whereas the pentatonic is a little bit more easily digestible to our ear. Nothing really gives us a tension like that major seventh does. It's just I would think about it like that. The major seven arpeggio gives us a little more tension because we hit that major seventh.
Yes.
And the pentatonic, all of those notes are very nice and easy on that chord. So that's why the combination of them is good, because it's not enough to just play the arpeggio and come up with something melodic. And if we just play this pentatonic scale, we don't get enough tension and flavor to it. It's just kind of all basic. So this is one way we can combine by going up one and coming down the other. Okay. So that's how I describe it. It's a good question.
Got one question.
Yeah, Pierre.
When you make the connection, do you use your pinky?
Yeah, so I make pinky up for that one.
Uh-huh.
And then I have my third and first finger.
Okay.
And then I use 3-1 for the rest of it. Sometimes on this G, I'll use my pinky. So sometimes I go 3-1, 3-1, 3-1, 4-1 for that pattern.
Okay.
Just because for that triad, it's very comfortable to go like 1, 3, 5, like with the middle, index, and pinky.
Yeah, I use the pinky here.
So even on the descending pentatonic, I like having that last 3 be that same fingering shape.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks, Pierre.
Yes. Yesterday you told us that in pentatonic we avoid the 7, didn't you?
Yes. So for this, we're not playing the major seventh when we're descending.
Yeah. That means with the arpeggio we have the 7 and that sounds good. And if we have descending, we take the pentatonic and the 7 don't sound good.
It's not that it wouldn't. We could do it either way. Basically, I'm presenting one option of ascending the arpeggio and then descending the pentatonic. You could also do the reverse. But it's just, I wanted to really keep the scope of this limited. So we could go up the pentatonic and then down the arpeggio. Like, so you could go up the pentatonic. That sounds cool. But it's really just that we want a combination of both of those sounds. The chord tones with the 7th, and we need a little bit more notes to come up with some melodies. Just the arpeggio notes, they're the exact same intervals, right? We're always having a third jump. So it's hard to create like an interesting melody with that. So that combination of the pentatonic and the arpeggios is really nice in a way where you can play partial of both. I could play one octave of the arpeggio and then part of the pentatonic. And that sounds like a little, once I start to add some rhythm to it. That's just like up the arpeggio and then pentatonic notes. Arpeggio. Pentatonic.
Okay.
To me, this is an easier way of creating melodies. Basically, all those notes together would be the C major scale, except for F, right? Which is sometimes how it's described. Like use the C major scale, but just take out the F. The problem with that, though, is that it doesn't really tell you how to use the remaining notes of the scale. And this is a way of actually saying it's a combination of the arpeggio, because that describes the sound we're playing over, And then the pentatonic notes are easy to generate melodic ideas. So we want both of that, chord tones plus pentatonic.
And one last question to this. You told us when you play this, try to imagine what you're playing. What do you mean with that? Imagine the chord or imagine the shape?
So I found for different students, they have differences in what they're visualizing. So it could be the shape. I think that's the most common, like visualizing this arpeggio shape. And you could visualize it in 2 octaves. Like one thing that's important here is you're not going to really visualize like all 6 strings all at once, like the whole thing. That doesn't happen for me either. It's really just your awareness kind of expands beyond the string that you're on, maybe 1 or 2 strings. That's enough. So if I'm here, I see the rest of this pattern. And that's a big part of actually being able to play it quickly, is that I'm very aware of where those notes are. I don't have to like think about it or guess. It's just like instantaneous. This is all like one thing. And so it's maybe you visualize that up to there. And then when I'm here, now I can visualize. It's like now the next part's revealed to me of that. And so as I'm going through it, I'm like, this is one thing. And then I play the other thing. And so if I have that in my awareness, sometimes I see that chord shape that I'm playing over it. So that some people have an easier time visualizing that chord shape, and they say, oh, that's like that part of that chord. And there's certain chords where I visualize the chord more than I visualize the arpeggio. For example, like when we talked about secret jazz chord, my experience with that, I visualize the chord a lot more than a certain arpeggio shape with that. But for these ones, for like basic major 7, dominant 7, minor 7, I'm pretty sure I visualize the arpeggio more than I'm visualizing the chord.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, good question, Cedar. All right, so let's look at the next one here. Same idea. The thing that changes, actually, let's finish with our C major 7. So let's do this up on the other position, right? So up here. It's the exact same. If you look at the notes, it's the exact same notes, right? Same octaves, everything's exactly the same, just a different position. All right, so let's try that for a couple minutes. I'll give you guys some time. Okay, let's take a look now at the dominant 7 ones. So the only thing that changes here is the arpeggio portion, because if you remember, we kept the same C major pentatonic for the dominant chords. So this gives us a little resolution here with that dominant 7 going into the A. And this actually works really well as well if you had a C7 here, and then this was going up to, let's say this was resolving then to F major 7. This pattern actually would still work really well over F major 7. So that's also part of this. We're learning some good voice leading with that B flat going down to A. It still works even if it was just C7. So C7, and then coming down. Again, it's important to play the chord in between this so you can also hear what we're playing over. All right, so let's play through that for a minute. All right. Let's look at the same pattern, but for the C7 up here around the 8th fret. Again, it should feel pretty much the same. And really try to make sure you're getting a good transition between the arpeggio and the pentatonic so that there's no weird pause in between there. It should go straight through, all consistent 8th notes, even if it's at a slower tempo. Same thing. Let's do this for about a minute.
Chase, how would you play the F major 7 up here next to the C? The chord?
The chord?
Yes.
So I would do, if we're doing this C7 up here, is that the one you're talking about, Fred? Like this position? So yeah, we have this C7 or this C13, and then the F major would just be this, the same shape that we did for C major at the beginning, but up here. So that's a really common progression. And what's nice about this pattern is that, again, it works for that even if we weren't staying on C7. right there. When you hit that A, that's where the F major would be. And you don't have to change anything. You can still play C major pentatonic. So that's all fits right with that. I'm trying to give you guys patterns and situations that are really applicable to a lot of different situations, even though I might not be explaining all of the situations that it works in right now. It's just kind of like laying the groundwork for that. So it's already familiar with you guys. So why don't we take a look at the minor 7 ones now? And this sounds a bit similar, the arpeggio going up and the minor pentatonic coming down, because the minor pentatonic has all of the notes in the C minor 7 chord. This all fits together as feeling like much more of the same sound than the dominant 7 and the pentatonic, or the major 7 and the pentatonic. So back here, C minor 7. You'll also notice we have a pull off here, because in this situation, we have 3 notes on that first string. So in the picking style that I use, I would do a down pick for that G, an up pick for the B flat, and I don't want to end on a down pick, so I pull off for that last G. So I'm going down, up, pull off, and then continuing down, up, down, up, down, up, down. So that's just if you're wondering about the picking. You can also use whatever picking feels comfortable. So let's try it with the minor 7 for a little bit, and then let me know if you guys have questions. Any questions about this? You guys cool with this? Max.
Chase, I'm looking at this as a possible lead-in, especially the second major, the minor pentatonic, into the 5. That is F7.
Okay.
In a 2/5, and so if you're ending on an E flat, what would be a next logical note to move into F? You would think it might be an A, or even move up one full note to the F itself. What are some of your options for moving in a 2/5/1 from C minor
Sure.
to F7?
Yeah, so we have 2 options. Let's say most of the time we're not going to have a 2 measure C minor 7 and then F7, right?
Right.
So it's usually one measure.
So I'm only looking at this.
You're looking at the second one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, either one, frankly.
Yeah. I'll explain both. So if we're
Okay.
just playing the arpeggio, right, and we're going up, and then the next chord is F7, we might want to hit A here instead of G.
Mm-hmm.
But it also could work in most situations to just still play C minor. You could also just still play C minor is another option. But if you want,
that sounds nice.
Yeah, if you want that sound, then you hit A. The other option that you were asking is, say we're descending on C minor and then it goes to F7, right? So we're doing this.
Mm-hmm.
I probably you have a couple options. You could keep going down, but we're starting to get kind of low here.
Yes.
Right? So I probably would go back up and maybe do something with either, like you said, going into F. You could go up the arpeggio. Let me think what else.
Going to A from that doesn't sound quite right to me.
No, you wouldn't want to jump immediately to A. You would want a nice lead in like this B flat to A that we did before.
Mm-hmm.
One other option is to treat that E flat like part of an E flat major 7 and continue up E flat major 7 over an F7. So theoretically, it kind of gets out of what it starts to become beyond what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
But just to answer your question, I might go, so descend with C minor, and then I might hit D and then go back up E flat major.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes.
And play that kind of thing. So it's like,
yeah.
And then maybe I eventually hit F. I'm sorry, A.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
you get
that seems more advanced. What I really like is moving, or is the first measure, because that's a really nice lead in into A.
Yeah, that's probably the first option I would present. Even something like this, which on the face of it seems pretty simple, is really a nice framework to come up with ideas. Like what I was doing when we were muted and working on this is I was literally just playing through the C minor. I was going up the same arpeggio and just trying to come with a little bit more melodic of an ending through this, adding some different rhythm, right? So if it's like just ending on like the 9th.
Yes. Yes.
But all that is really just the pentatonic. Like everything I just did was just up the arpeggio and then down some sort of pentatonic.
Yes.
So the concept here, even at a more advanced level, is really the same. It's like I'm just thinking kind of up this arpeggio, C minor 7, and then coming down some sort of pentatonic, sometimes adding in chromaticism, sometimes going, but then back to the pentatonic. So going from a more beginner intermediate level to an advanced level is not just about adding in more concepts, more ideas, more advanced concepts. It really has a lot to do with just improved, better execution and adding in some better rhythmic ideas so that it's not all the same. So as you develop your facility and your experience, you can start to play different rhythmic ideas with a lot more confidence, like a lot more convincingly in a sense. And then even simple things like this sound a lot better all of a sudden. So,
well, Chase, if I could do 1/100th of the teaching you've done over the last 6 or 7 months, I could be the best guitar player in my rural town of 1,800.
It's a pretty small town.
Incidentally, speaking of towns, have any of you read the last week or two about a town in Kansas with a newspaper issue?
No.
Yeah. All right. Well, it made international news in a very negative way, and so if none of you are aware of that, I will keep it completely silent. But if some of the leaders in the town got in a big fight, and it ended up where President the president's press secretary actually mentioned it in one of her press conferences as a freedom of the press issue.
Well, I'll have to look it up after this.
You don't need to. You don't need to, Chase.
You're right. You're right.
Thank you.
I need to get back to content.
Yeah, that's a really great idea of trying to do what we are learning well before we try to move into doing something that's more complicated and perhaps very enticing at the moment.
Yeah, I think it is enticing, but I just want to caution people that I think it's also the wrong path to go down for actually improving. So trying to demonstrate that even what I'm playing, it's really basic concepts just executed at a higher level. So that's what I would encourage everyone to focus on. All right, let's look at this last one so that we can finish up with that. And then any other final questions. So this is C minor 7 up here. Again, same exact notes that we just did, just a new position. One thing I'll point out here because of this pull off and because of what I said before about the roll or not the roll. So before I said I like going 8, 8, this E flat and G, switching fingers like first and second, and I'll show my hands in a second, and then stretching to the B flat. I would not pull off to the middle finger though. So this, let's just look at this part. 8, 11, 8, which is G, B flat, and G. So before I was saying I like playing that arpeggio, ring finger, index, middle, and then pinky. If I'm then pulling off, I have to switch to my index finger to pull back off to that. So it's index, middle, pinky, and then back to index. You can avoid that switch if you want by just doing a roll. So ring, index, index, pinky, and then pull off to that. But this stretch from a pinky to a middle finger to do a pull off, I would never do that. So the idea is you always have to pull off back to the index finger. For me, it still makes more sense to switch fingers to get that clarity of sound. But either way is good. So let's practice this one for a little bit. And then, like I said, any other final questions, you guys can let me know. So let's take a minute or two on this.
Chase?
Yeah, Fred.
You used the pull off because of the of the right hand, right?
Correct.
And how does the right hand continue?
So here, let me add some of those pickings in here so this makes more sense. So I would have a down pick here, an up pick, and like I said, I want that last pick I do on that string to be up. So there's one more note. I don't want to do another down, so I have to pull off. From there, you just continue down, up for all the rest. So that pull off basically resets us. We got into a problem because we had the wrong number of notes on the string. So we do a quick little pull off. And that happens pretty naturally in real time. Like, you know, I might not do this exact pattern or I don't know how many notes are on the string as I'm improvising. But I just know as I'm finishing, I want to go into another string. I'm either able to because I finished with an up pick, or I do a little pull off and then I continue, right? Because I might go, here's some example. And I didn't know how many picks that was going to be for what I didn't think about it ahead of time. But I just knew I did an up pick and I wanted one more note, so I just pull off. You really just start to get a feel for it with the left and right hand synced up. Any other final comments or questions about this or anything we did with the improvising? Cool. And then just to reiterate, as far as practicing it, I would play the chord. At this point, then go up the arpeggio and down the pentatonic for whichever pentatonic makes sense for it. And then just make sure you can do that for the C major 7, do it for both, C7, do it for both, C minor 7. Should take, I would take like a minute or two for each. You know, it's really just to refresh, make sure you get that down, and then spend any extra time on whatever chord is giving you trouble, if any. So tomorrow we get to start putting all of this together and have a little bit of a chord melody so you can see how the chords and the rhythms we've been doing and then these patterns with the arpeggios and the pentatonics all connect up so we can start to form it into a little bit of a song. All right, guys? All right, so that wraps up the first 5 days of this course, Learn Your First Jazz Song in 7 days. In days 6 and 7, we get into the chord melody. If you guys are watching this on Saturday, it's actually live today, 12 p.m. Eastern Time, or Sunday, 12 p.m. Eastern Time. If not, you can check out the recordings within CGA as well as any of the PDFs that we've been checking out. Hope you guys enjoyed that series. Let me know in the comments what you guys thought of this, if you like this format. And if you're not subscribed and you watched this whole video, definitely subscribe. You clearly enjoy the content. So I'll see you guys around. Thanks.